The rain had been coming down for 6 hours straight when I pulled into the driveway, still in my scrubs, still smelling like the inside of Trauma Bay 3. I just spent 14 hours holding a 4-year-old girl's hand while a surgical team rebuilt her femur after a drunk driver crossed the center line on Highway 26. Her name was Wren. I remember because her mother kept whispering it like a prayer. "Wren baby, mommy's here. Wren baby, please." And I stood there in the corner of that operating room, squeezing IV bags and checking vitals, and I did not cry. Not once. Because that's what they pay me for. To not cry. I cried in my car on the drive home. So, when I turned onto our street in Beaverton and saw the duffel bags piled on the front lawn, soaked black with rainwater, I genuinely thought for a second that I was hallucinating from exhaustion. The hokas I'd been on my feet in for 14 hours were squishing as I stepped out of the Civic. My mother was standing on the front porch, with her phone held up horizontal, recording, and my stepfather was behind her with his arms crossed, and my older brother was leaning against the railing eating from a bag of chips like he was watching a movie. My mother said, loud enough for the neighbors to hear, "Say something to the camera, sweetheart. Tell everyone how grateful you are that we let you live here rent-free for so long." I just stood there, rain running down my face, hospital badge still clipped to my chest. "She's not gonna say anything," my brother said, mouth full. "She's gonna do that thing where she just stares. It's so weird." My stepfather said, 29 years old. 29 years. Old. "We've been so patient. So patient. But you have not contributed one thing to this household in months, and tonight is the night we draw a line. I want you to understand something. I paid the property tax that year. I paid it in March, $11,000, out of the savings I'd been building since nursing school, because my mother had called me crying at 2 in the morning saying they were going to lose the house. I paid the electric bill in January when it almost got shut off. I paid for my brother's car insurance because he hadn't held a job longer than 4 months since he was 22 and he was now 33. I bought the groceries. I drove my stepfather to dialysis 3 times a week before my shifts. I refilled all 4 of their prescriptions every month at the Walgreens on Cedar Hills, because none of them could ever remember which day to call it in. But she was filming me in the rain and saying I hadn't contributed one thing. I didn't argue. I didn't even put my purse down. I just walked over to the pile of bags. My mother followed me with the camera, narrating for whatever audience she imagined was watching. She doesn't even have anything to say. Look at her. This is what entitlement looks like, ladies. I picked up the first duffel. It weighed about 40 pounds wet. I threw it in the trunk. My stepfather had thrown my things hard, I could tell, because the zipper on the second bag had busted and my underwear was scattered across the wet grass, white cotton bras and ratty old socks, and my mother's camera caught all of it. I picked them up one by one. I didn't rush. I wasn't going to leave a single thing in that yard for her to mail to me in a box later with a Bible verse sharpied on it. I gathered every pair of socks, every bra, the framed nursing school diploma my Aunt Rosalie had paid to have matted before she died of pancreatic cancer 2 years ago, glass cracked diagonally across the seal, my scrub caps, a small wooden box that had belonged to my grandmother with my baby teeth in it, a coffee mug that said Pediatric ER, where tiny humans get patched up, a stack of birthday cards from my grandfather who died when I was 11, that I'd kept in my nightstand since I was a kid. I put everything in the trunk and the back seat. It took maybe 20 minutes. The neighbors across the street, the Vandermeers, were watching from their porch. Mr. Vandermeer had his hand over his mouth. Mrs. Vandermeer was crying. She'd known me since I was 7. She'd watched me leave for senior prom from that same porch. When I was done, I closed the trunk gently. I did not slam it. I walked back across the lawn, the rain still coming down, and I stopped at the bottom of the porch steps and I looked up at my mother, my stepfather, my brother, all 3 of them. I said, "I hope you sleep well tonight, because there's going to come a day when none of you can sleep at all." That was all I said. My mother's smile faltered. Just for a second, the camera dipped. I think it was the first time in my entire life she'd ever looked at me and not known what was coming next. I got in the Civic. I backed out of the driveway. I drove. I didn't have anywhere to go. That's the part nobody tells you about. You can have a moment of dignity. You can deliver a line like that on a porch in the rain, but then the car is moving and your hands are shaking on the wheel and the wipers are slapping back and forth and you realize you don't have anywhere to go. I drove to the hospital parking garage. I knew the security guard on the night shift, a Vietnamese woman named Lynn, who used to bring me homemade banh mi on Wednesdays. I parked on the fourth level near the elevator and I locked the doors and I climbed into the back seat and I sat there in my wet scrubs, surrounded by my entire life in 9 duffel bags and 3 Tupperware bins, and I called the only person I could think of. Her name was Margery Pfluger. She was 68 years old. She'd been the charge nurse on my unit for 22 years before she retired in February. She lived in a small ranch house in Aloha with her cat, Walter, and a backyard full of dahlia bushes. She picked up on the second ring even though it was almost midnight. I said, "Marge, it's me." And I couldn't get the rest out. She said, "Where are you, honey?" I said, "Garage." "Fourth level," she said. "I'm putting on my shoes." She came and got me at 12:40 in the morning. She didn't ask a single question. She just made me get in her Subaru and follow her home, and when we got there she ran a bath for me, and put my scrubs in the wash, and gave me a pair of pajamas from her dresser that smelled like lavender. And she made me a grilled cheese sandwich and a mug of chamomile tea, and she sat across the kitchen table from me at 1 in the morning and she said, "Tell me when you're ready, or don't ever tell me. Either is fine." I told her. She listened. She did not interrupt. When I got to the part about my mother filming, she made a small sound in her throat like something hurt. When I got to the part about my stepfather throwing the bags, she stood up and refilled my tea and sat back down without saying anything. When I finished, she said, "You're staying in the back room, as long as you need. Walter is going to be on your bed every night because that's his room and he doesn't understand boundaries. You can pay me $200 a month if it makes you feel better, but I don't need it. I have my pension and Norman's Social Security and the house is paid off." Norman was her husband. He died of an aneurysm in 2019. I cried then. Properly cried. Sitting at her kitchen table in her dead husband's flannel pajamas while a fat orange cat wound around my ankles. The next morning I called the hospital and asked for 2 personal days. My charge nurse, a man named Dietrich Brassard, who was built like a refrigerator and had hands like an Easter ham, said, "Take 3, and don't argue with me." I didn't. I spent those 3 days at Marge's kitchen table making a list. I am a list person. It's how I get through 14-hour trauma shifts. You make the list, you work the list, you do not deviate from the list. The list was 1. Change my phone number. 2. Remove myself from the joint checking account I'd opened with my mother in 2017 when she said her credit was too bad to get one of her own. 3. Cancel the autopay on my stepfather's prescriptions. 4. Cancel the autopay on my brother's car insurance. 5. Cancel the autopay on the electric. 6. Cancel the autopay on the cable. 7. Cancel the autopay on the water. 8. Cancel the autopay on the homeowner's insurance. 9. Look into whether I'd been claimed as a dependent on anyone's taxes without my permission. I had been. My mother had been doing it for 6 years. 10. File a corrected return. It took me 3 days of phone calls. I sat at Marge's table with a yellow legal pad and a cup of coffee that she refilled every hour and a half without asking, and I unwound every single financial thread that connected me to that house. By Thursday afternoon, I had a brand new bank account at a credit union in Hillsborough. My paycheck was being routed to it, and I had a new phone number that nobody in my family had. I felt something I hadn't felt in a decade. I felt quiet. Day 5, I went back to work. The pediatric ER on a Friday night in October is its own kind of Halloween costume injuries, broken ankles from middle school dances, RSV season ramping up, and I worked a 15-hour shift without sitting down once. Dietrich watched me from the nurse's station around hour 12 and said, If you're trying to outrun something, you're not going to. But I'll let you try for another 3 hours. I laughed for the first time in a week. Day 6. I was at Marge's on my lunch break. She lived 12 minutes from the hospital, faster than my old house, eating the soup she'd made me, and I heard tires on her driveway. A horn. Then another horn. Then another horn. Then a man's voice yelling. I knew the voice before I looked. My stepfather was standing in Marge's driveway in his slippers and his Trailblazers jacket yelling at her front door. I know she's in there. Tell her to come out here right now. Marge was at her kitchen window drying her hands on a dish towel. She said very calmly without turning around, Honey, do you want me to call the police or do you want to handle this yourself? I said, I'll handle it. I walked outside. I did not have shoes on. The November grass was so cold it almost burned. My stepfather stopped yelling when he saw me. He looked smaller than I remembered, which was strange because it had only been 6 days. He looked tired. He looked like a man who hadn't taken his blood pressure medication in 6 days, which he hadn't, because I wasn't there to remind him. He said, Your mother needs you to come home. I said, How did you find me here? He didn't answer right away. Then he said, Your brother. He had that app on your phone. The one where you can see where the family is. I had forgotten about that. I'd installed it 3 years ago when my mother had a small stroke and I wanted to be able to find her if she wandered. My brother had been added as a precaution. I'd never thought about it again. I said, Okay. I'm changing that tonight. Anything else? He said, Your mother's not eating. She's not sleeping. She lost it last night. Threw a lamp at the television. We can't, I said. I am not coming back, he said. We can talk about the things we said. We were upset. Your mother was upset. You know how she gets when she's upset. I said, I know exactly how she gets when she's upset. I said, I know exactly how she gets. I have known how she gets since I was 6 years old. I am not coming back. He stood there in the cold. He was wearing his slippers and they were getting wet. I noticed that he had not shaved. My stepfather is a man who shaves every morning of his life. He said, Your mother loves you. I said, My mother filmed me. He didn't have anything to say to that. I said, Tell my brother to take the app off his phone. If I see you here again, I will file a restraining order. Do you understand me? He nodded. I went back into the house. Marge had already brought my shoes to the door. She didn't say anything. She just handed me my shoes and went back to the soup. That night, I deleted the family tracking app from the cloud. I changed every password I'd ever used. I called my IT friend Therese from work, and she walked me through how to make sure no one had access to my iCloud. It took 2 hours. When it was done, I felt like I'd had a knot in my chest for 10 years, and someone had finally untied it. Day 7, 8, 9. Marge's house got quieter. I got quieter. I started sleeping 8 hours a night for the first time in my adult life. Walter, the cat, slept on my chest. I started taking walks in the morning before my shifts, just around the block, and the air in Aloha in November smelled like wet leaves and somebody's wood-burning fireplace, and I'd come back to the house with my cheeks red and Marge would have coffee on. Day 10 was when my old phone started lighting up. I'd kept it. The number was disconnected for incoming calls, but I could still see notifications come in if someone tried. I told myself I wasn't going to check it. I checked it on day 10 because I was curious. I'm human. There were 63 messages. I scrolled through them sitting on Marge's back porch with Walter on my lap. The first one was from my mother. Honey, we need to talk. Call me back. Sent day 2. Day 3. I don't know why you're being like this. Day 3. Your brother is very upset. Day 4. Your stepfather missed dialysis yesterday. I can't get him there alone. I need you to call me. Day 4. The electric company called. Day 4. Why did you cancel the insurance? Day 5. This is incredibly selfish. Day 5. This is incredibly selfish. Day 5. I raised you better than this. Day 5. I did not raise you to be cruel. Day 6. I'm sorry. Please call me. Your stepfather is having a hard time. Day 6. He missed another dialysis appointment. Day 6. Please. Day 7. I'm begging you. Day 7. I know we said things we didn't mean. Day 7. I know we said things we didn't mean. Day 7. Your brother got fired. Day 8. He says it's your fault because you canceled his insurance and he got pulled over. Day 8. He spent the night in jail. Day 8. I had to put it on a credit card. Day 8. I don't know what we're going to do. Day 9. Where are you? Day 9. Where are you? Day 9. Where are you? Day 10. From my brother, dude, mom's losing it for real, come home. Day 10. From my mother, I am sorry. I am so sorry. I will get on my knees if I have to. Day 10. 2:47 a.m. Please, please, please. Day 10. 3:12 a.m. I deleted the video. I sat on Marge's back porch, and I read all 63 of them. And I felt almost nothing. That's the part I want people to understand. I did not feel triumphant. I did not feel vindicated. I felt the way you feel when you finally finish a paper that's been hanging over your head for a semester. Just done. Just empty in the way that means there's room for something else. Marge came out with 2 cups of coffee. She sat next to me in the other Adirondack chair. She didn't ask. I handed her the phone. She scrolled through them, sipping her coffee. She didn't say anything until she got to the end. Then she said, "Are you going to respond?" I said, "I don't know." She said, "You don't have to know today." By day 14, there were 127 messages. My brother's fiancée, a woman named Sigrid Bjornsson, who I'd met exactly twice, sent me a long voicemail saying she didn't know what was going on, but that my brother was drinking again and could I please just call my mother. My mother's sister, Aunt Madeline, who lived in Tucson and who I hadn't spoken to in 4 years, sent a text saying I always knew there was something wrong in that house. I'm proud of you. Don't call her. My stepfather sent a single text that just said, "I'm sorry." I read it 3 times. I think it was the only time in 18 years of marriage to my mother that I'd ever heard him apologize for anything. I didn't respond to any of them. I started looking at studio apartments. There was one in Cedar Mill, 800 square feet, with a small balcony that looked out at a Japanese maple, $1,200 a month. The leasing agent was a kid named Bevan, maybe 23, who clearly couldn't tell whether I was a tenant or his mother. I signed the lease on day 18. I moved in on day 21. Marge helped me. She also gave me a casserole dish, a set of dish towels, and Walter for the first night, because you've never lived alone before and the first night is the hardest. I cried into that cat's fur for an hour. On day 23, I started the paperwork for the nurse practitioner program at OHSU. I'd been putting it off for 4 years. "Why haven't you applied?" my friend Therese had asked me, and I'd never had a real answer. The real answer was that my mother needed me at home, and if I moved to school full-time, the system was going to collapse. Now the system had collapsed and I was free. On day 30, my mother showed up at the hospital. She walked into the lobby of the pediatric ER carrying a casserole dish. I don't know how she found out my schedule. I think my brother had called the nurse line pretending to be my husband. She sat down in the waiting area between a 6-year-old and a man with a screaming toddler, and she waited. Dietrich found me at the supply closet and said, "There's a woman here who says she's your mother. Do you want me to handle it?" I said, "What do you mean handle it?" He said, "I have a wide range of skills." I laughed. I said, "I'll talk to her." Outside. I walked her out to the smoking gazebo behind the ambulance bay. She tried to hug me. I stepped back. She set the casserole dish down on the bench and started crying, which she has done my entire life when she wants something, and I am not exaggerating when I say this is the first time it didn't work on me. She said, "I made your favorite, the tuna noodle thing." I said, "I hate tuna noodle." "I have always hated tuna noodle. That's what my brother likes." She blinked. I said, "Mom, I have one question, and I want you to think before you answer." She nodded. I said, "Why did you film me?" She opened her mouth. She closed it. She opened it again. She said, "I wasn't thinking." I said, "You were thinking. You set the camera up horizontal. You waited for me to get out of the car. You narrated for an audience. You called me selfish in front of the Vandermeers. You filmed me picking up my own underwear out of wet grass. You were thinking, Mom. You were thinking a lot. What I want to know is, what were you hoping was going to happen?" She didn't answer. I said, "I think you wanted me to apologize on camera. I think you wanted footage of me crying and begging to stay. I think you wanted to post it so that everyone in your church and your book club and your Facebook group would say what a Saint Linnea is, putting up with that ungrateful daughter all these years. I think you wanted to be seen as the long-suffering mother. And I think you knew that I would not give that to you because I never have, and that's why you've always hated me a little bit." Her face went white. I said, "I'm not coming back. I'm not paying any of the bills. I'm not driving him to dialysis. I'm not bailing out my brother. I'm not paying property tax this year or any other year. I am not your retirement plan. I am not the family ATM. I am not the family scapegoat. I am your daughter, and I love you, and I am leaving. Don't come back to my work. Don't show up at Marge's. Don't try to find my new apartment. If you do, I will get a restraining order and I will not blink while the judge signs it." She said, "How can you do this to me?" I said, "I can do this because you taught me how. You taught me how to throw a person's life on the lawn when they're tired and cold and have nothing left. I learned from you, Mom. I learned from the best." I picked up the casserole dish. I handed it back to her. She took it mechanically, like a person who didn't know what was happening. I said, "Drive home safe." I went back inside. I went into the bathroom and I splashed water on my face and I walked back out. And I treated a kid with a broken collarbone for the next 40 minutes and I did not cry once. I cried in my car on the drive home. That was 8 months ago. The apartment is good. The Japanese maple turned red in October and gold in November, and now in May it's putting out its little summer leaves. I got into the NP program. I start in the fall. Marge comes over every Sunday and we make a roast chicken and I drink 1 glass of wine and she drinks 2. Walter has decided he lives at both places. He has 2 beds, 2 food bowls, 2 people. I have not spoken to my mother. I have not spoken to my stepfather. I have not spoken to my brother. I heard, through Aunt Madeline, that they lost the house in February. My mother is renting a 2-bedroom in Gresham. My brother lives in the 2nd bedroom. My stepfather moved into a memory care facility in April. The dialysis Miss Days finally caught up with him, and he had a series of small strokes in January, and he doesn't really remember my name anymore. Aunt Madeline says my mother is volunteering at the church food pantry now, which she had refused to do my entire childhood because she thought she was too good for it. I think about him sometimes. My stepfather. He was not a kind man and he was not a soft man, but he was the one who said I'm sorry, and I think about whether I should have gone to him before the strokes. I don't know. I don't think there's a right answer. Marge says, "Honey, you cannot save people who would not save you." I think she's right. I'm trying to believe she's right. Here's the thing I want you to know if you're watching this and you're in a house right now where your bags are halfway packed in your head, where you're the one who pays the bills and drives to the appointments and remembers the birthdays and gets called selfish anyway, where you've been the foundation of a house that has never once thanked you for holding it up. You are not a burden. You have never been a burden. You are the only thing standing between them and the truth about themselves. And the day you walk away is the day they finally have to look in the mirror and they will hate you for it, and they will call and they will text, and they will show up with casseroles. And you do not owe them a single thing. The silence you leave behind is the loudest sentence you will ever speak. I learned that in a driveway, in the rain, on a Wednesday in November, holding a cardboard box of birthday cards from a grandfather who would have been so disappointed in all of them. If you're watching this from your kitchen, or your car on a break, or your bed at 2 in the morning, tell me, what time is it where you are, and how long has it been since someone in your house said thank you? I'll be here, reading. I'm not going anywhere. I think about that driveway a lot. The way the rain felt on my scrubs, the way my mother's phone glowed in the dark like she was live streaming a crime scene. And I think about the fact that none of what happened to my family afterward was an accident. It was math. It was cause and effect with the slowest, quietest arithmetic in the world. For 19 years, I was the load-bearing wall in that house, and a wall doesn't get thanked. A wall gets leaned on. When I left, the ceiling came down, and they wanted to blame me for the gravity. But gravity was always there. I just stopped fighting it for them. Here is what I learned, in the order I learned it. The first thing is that being good and being used are not the same thing, and a person who confuses them will be drained dry by the time she is 40. I confused them for a long time. I thought paying the property tax was love. I thought driving my stepfather to dialysis at 5 in the morning was love. It wasn't love. It was a bill I had been handed at birth and had never been allowed to question. The second thing is that walking away is not cruelty. Cruelty is filming your daughter in the rain. Cruelty is calling a woman who works 14-hour shifts a parasite. Walking away is just honesty with your feet. And the people who scream loudest when you leave are the ones who knew, the whole time, exactly what they were taking from you. The third thing, and this one took the longest, is that strength is not the same as endurance. I endured for 29 years. I was the strongest woman in that house, and I had nothing to show for it but a cracked diploma and a savings account I'd emptied to keep their lights on. Real strength was Margery handing me a pair of pajamas at 1 in the morning and not asking a single question. Real strength was deleting a tracking app at midnight. Real strength was looking my mother in the face at the hospital and saying I have always hated tuna noodle. The smallest sentence I have ever spoken and the truest. If you are watching this from a kitchen where you do all the dishes, from a car where you drive everyone everywhere, from a house where your name is only said when something is owed, I want you to hear me. You are not selfish for leaving. You are not heartless for going quiet. You are not cold for letting the consequences land where the choices were made. A foundation that walks away is still a foundation. It just chooses, finally, what it wants to hold up. And what I wanted to hold up was a small apartment with a Japanese maple outside the window, and a cat named Walter, and a woman named Marge who pours my coffee without being asked, and a life that belongs for the first time to the person living it. That is the only inheritance I ever needed. I gave it to myself.